the showcase tonight, and we'll go for maybe 20-25 minutes, is I want to walk through Nathan's State of AI. People haven't seen this report. It's an unbelievably comprehensive report. I think they've been doing it for 15 years. And I want to walk through his slides, and I'm going to also share in the chat right now shared document. People want to take in notes, but it's got 5 or 6 major areas here, and I think we'll just cover the technology and the business ones and executive summary here. So let me share my screen.
$17 for bad tie.
So, oops. So this is Nathan from Air Street. They're both investors and analysts. They stay pretty technical. Let's get past the definitions here. Executive summary, frontier lab performance. That's what some people call foundation models continue to converge, but OpenAI remains the edge. I think that's very consistent with what we've seen. NVIDIA remains a powerful company out there, 3 trillion club. You can add all the banks, Goldman Sachs and everyone in financial services and Wall Street, and their market caps collectively are still smaller than NVIDIA. So really big. They do a good job of looking at what their predictions were and what came and true and what didn't here. They predicted a Hollywood-grade production would make visual effects. They were correct on that. I'll let you read some of the other ones. They thought last year also very limited progress on global AI governance, and we continue to see that as an area that's not gained a lot of market and government consistency. And inference loads here in the bottoms continues to grow significantly. So 5 sections, we'll walk through a handful of them first. On the research side, I like some of the titles they have, but the OpenAI's reign of terror is coming to an end as Claude 3.5 and Gemini and Grok 2 have gotten close, but then they came out with O1 model, which has blown away a lot of folks with how good it is. A lot of opportunity on, if people have comments, or feel free, I don't want to just read all the slides, but I think I really want to highlight key takeaways from this. And if people really disagree or see something that we're missing about it, raise your hand and we'll get you in the conversation here. O1, for people who haven't used O1, this is the more advanced model. It's horribly named and very confusingly named, but it's when you pay the $20 a month, as a consumer, you also get access to an O1 model, which will do more advanced thinking, have multiple models and agents under the covers, and really give you pretty impressive answers, particularly for things that require a lot of logic and puzzles and math. In the last 12 months, Nathan notes the tremendous progress that quote open source or certainly free download Llama 3 has made out there. We've seen that again and again. And what was really just kind of even 12 to 18 months ago was aspirational talk from Meta on companies taking this model seriously has really moved into the main, certainly in our observation here, and continue to see very impressive adoption and impressive in performance. The Llama 3.1 405B in particular, I know it uses a lot of energy, but boy, it is really at or slightly above or certainly close to GPT-4. And there's thousands and thousands of companies taking that and building around it, and NVIDIA being one of them, to build more opportunities. So at least in my mind, you know, what started as the ChatGPT 3.5 revolution November, I guess 2 full years ago now, has really got a lot more competitors in the race now. I thought this was an excellent chart. This is the quote open source models. This is something we've been looking for around. The columns are the different ways to evaluate the aspects of being open source. Is it code? Is it data? Is it weights open? And the rows are across here are the different models out there. So it's a real good visual indication for the IT folks and everyone else that even though this category is called open source, this is not Apache license open source type things that we've been all used to in the last 20, 30 years. Comments? Contamination, lots of everyone's talking about new models going against benchmarks, and this is just noting that there's some interesting debates about are we really starting to see more contamination of some of the models and models being built towards for the benchmarks here. OpenAI still number one, which is impressive, I think, given all the executive turnovers over there. We've seen a board coup. We've seen the CEO fired and come back. Wall Street highlighted that 12 of their senior execs have left. 3 of them left right before they closed a $5 billion funding round, and investors still put money into it. So they really are executing despite some challenges on the governance side here. The shrink the models, we continue to see. This is something that I think people were just discussing a year ago. We're seeing a lot more real progress on smaller models that are much more IT or efficient on the chips and electricity and cost size.
Yeah, Paul, could I just go at that a little bit? I mean, I think that one of the things that we're finding as we go through some of the vendors on the buyer's guide is that this area is so active, and I think it's a combination of two things. We talked before about own your own intelligence, and people wanting things behind the firewall, and also wanting to be able to vertically integrate enough so that they have control and some pushback capability against the vendors. And I've just been amazed when I'm thinking in particular about our conversation with RC and out of Boston. Their ability to generate small models, saying things like they could train a 7 billion parameter model in a day, which, if they can do that, is amazing. And they can do it on cheap hardware. I think that this area of shrinking models and then doing model merge is going to be incredibly active in the next 15 months.
Yeah. So we've really seen an explosion of OpenAI as the big, large leader, closed and open ones catching them, and another vector of explosion of innovation on these small models here. Yeah, go ahead, Christina.
How much are you seeing compound models?
How do you define compound models?
Multiple small models that are either connected via agents or are stacked one on top of the other?
Yeah,
I think we're seeing, what's interesting, Christina, is I think we're seeing it in two ways, at least. One is you have folks like, what was the company that Accenture invested in that does the model management? I want to say Mistral, but that's not it. It begins with an M. Anyway, so I think you have companies coming in to do the orchestration layer.
Martian, I think, John.
Pardon me?
I think it might have been Martian, it's called.
Martian, thank you. Yes, Martian. And so Martian's, just a vendor doing that. We've also heard the same thing from folks who worked at Cigna and so forth, where they're actually building that model management capability. The other thing, Christina, is we work with the large, model companies. Inside the large models, they have multiple models. So they're parsing the input and then routing it internally to different size models inside and giving you so the large models are hybrid as well.
Yeah, that's how Inflections is architected. I'm not sure that's how OpenAI is architected, though.
Well, O1's running 3 or 4 models underneath.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
Okay.
so O1.
So they're all compound systems, essentially.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think the compound is either on one query comes in and does it get routed to 1 or 3 models or 10 models? Also, what happens within, so everything's going to be compound. And that's why we've kind of really moved to this kind of larger, enterprise intelligence application, because there's such an orchestration layer there. Yeah. Go ahead, Ashish, and then we'll go to Lucinda.
So,
I think the O1 model is still, the OpenAI model is still one big model, but the O1 architecture is, it goes in as the prompt to the model, and when it comes back with the responses, it processes those responses. And if it needs to do whatever the logic is doing in that reasoning box, then it goes back to the same model with a modified prompt and then combines the previous response with the new. So we do not know full details about how the reasoning box goes, but at the end, the model is single model, but the reasoning box is multiple processing, not exactly LLM call though.
But
Yeah.
but what's the thing that's judging the output? Isn't that another model?
No, that's a reasoning box. Reasoning box is not a model. It's more AI algorithms, which they haven't published much out on that yet.
Yeah, you say tomato, I say tomato. I mean, it's a model.
It's
It's a
not
model
a
that's
model.
judging. It's a model that's judging, the output in the context of a semantics that's trained.
Yeah, let's get a few more folks in here. Let's go to Ashish Bhatti then, and then Lucinda. Go ahead, Ashish.
We've seen a couple of trends, right? One of the things that we discussed last week in one of the morning reviews of an article is mixture of expert is one way of combining models. The other way of combining smaller models into larger inferencing model is model merge. So that's another trend that we're starting to see.
What is model merge?
Model merge is basically taking smaller models and then combining their inferencing capability into one bigger model. So it's actually a physical model, but trained from smaller models. I can forward you some documentation.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
It's very promising, Christina. Yeah, go ahead, Alexander. Lucinda first, and then
let me maybe add. This is Luda. It's taking the weights, and the common method is taking an average of the weights. That's the merge.
Thank you. Okay, thank you.
Lucinda,
Just
and then
a
Alexander.
few comments on what models are. I remember reading a quote by, I think it was Ilya Sutskever, where he said that like the LLM is not one huge thing, but 200 medium-sized things. And they're just a lot of components that are under the hood. And so as if somebody said that we don't know what all the different parts are, I mean, we're looking at this and we're seeing one interface. We're thinking we're seeing one thing, but we're seeing all these different, parts. I think that model merge is a very interesting thing, and, be able to kind of do transfer learning of one model specifics to another model. But then also there's like a whole thing about having a router, like a model router, essentially, where you can have different models that might be good at different things, and you have a router that kind of decides, here's a query. I'm going to do it like this, and I'm going to do a router. And it could be, as we've been seeing with the OpenAI and the other models that are coming out, they're doing more and more things. So things you used to be able to say like, oh, I can take 3.5, add some agents and make it outperform 4, or I can make it outperform, certain models. That's less than, sometimes that's not true, because sometimes the new models that come out are incredibly good.
Thanks, Lucinda. Alexander, then Tim. Go ahead, Alexander.
Yeah, I was just going to say that somebody was talking about the mixture of experts, and I think they should definitely read this article on the visualization of mixture of experts. It's a visual guide to the mixture of experts, and it really explains how it works as far as like routers, the different experts, and when they're called and when they're not called. But the article is called a visual guide to mixture of experts. So if you're ever interested.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. And someone finds it, please put it in the chat. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, so in terms of open source, this has been going on for a while, but to me, it's pretty simple. Maybe there's one complicated thing. Open source came about because software usually meant code, but the definition of open source was I could create what you created. I could create an instance of exactly what you created, and I could modify it to my heart's content. That's the definition of open source. So to me, the challenge here is you need this other thing called data. But some applications need a certain amount of data too. So to me, if I can't create exactly what you created, it's not open source. You can have varying layers of degrees, and maybe we need some new terminology about what these degrees are. But if I can't, I don't see any of them right now as open source because I can't create an OpenAI. I can't do it. I can't create even a llama right now, as far as I understand. So to me, there are different kinds of things we may need new terms for, but they're not what us coders used to call open source.
What's a new term, Tim? Is it? I've been using free download just to be obnoxious, but
You know, I'll have to think about it because I hate to say open anything because it's technically not.
yeah.
It's you know, it's open close. It's like jumbo shrimp or military intelligence. You know, we need one of those oxymoronic
Oxymorons,
phrases. Yeah, so maybe we'll call it the open closed models.
Right.
One question I have about this topic, because really free download does cover a significant amount of what people are getting today, is the use of the model for free. But do they have any obligations when using those open source models? Because in a traditional open source environment, the obligations go both ways.
Well, open source doesn't have anything to do with economics. TV's been free since, you know, network TV's been free forever. Lots of things are free. That's about network externalities. And John, I'm sure, can give you a long lecture on that. Open source, again, was about the ability to create these things that the original creator had in exactly the same way, using exactly the same code, and then make changes if you wanted to. But
you also
open
have an
source
obligation
doesn't
back
mean
to the
free.
open source community, right? So is there any
No,
obligation?
no,
when you
not
use a free
generally.
llama model?
It's a gift culture.
Yeah.
Yes.
The obligation was a norm potentially, but lots of people just downloaded it and never did anything.
Right. So I'm not saying that that it is a tit for tat, but I am saying that there's a license that obligates you to certain things when using an open source license.
There are different licenses. Yes, there are
Right.
different
So
licenses for open source,
is there
but
an
most of them
equivalent?
are pretty liberal.
Is
And
there an
also keep in
equivalent,
mind,
though,
Tim,
for-
that's only one layer of just I'm gifting you what I built. There's other
Right.
things on top of that in the machine learning world of are you not just giving me a license, MIT, Apache, whatever, but are you using open tooling? And then there's a third level they call open science, where I'm not showing you my private data, but I'm providing you with access to what I've built and the manner in which I built.
Yep. Well, we can go down the rabbit hole of this, but I'm just saying
my
for
question
software.
is, when you use an open model, one of these supposedly open models.
Yes.
is
So
there
take a look
any
at the
equivalent?
Linux paper I posted in chat.
Yeah, there's all sorts of restrictions on the licenses. That's another thing. That's a whole nother thing. The licenses that the models, these large language models, have been released with are generally not the quote unquote standard open source MIT Apache licenses. They are much more restrictive and they're quirky. So you have to read each license. They're all different.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, these models are not Apache 2 license, which is the most liberal of all of those
Right.
in the open source. So these models are not that.
Right.
Great. Let's keep driving. We're in page 3 of about 150 pages, so we'll go and time box the work here. So it's great. It's a really good discussion, though. So I don't mean to slow it down. So we talked about small models. We talked about mobile compute. We've all been talking a lot about this, how it's coming fast and furious, and a lot of us believe that the AI models coming out on devices, particularly smartphones next year, are going to really transform usage, particularly in the B2C market and with audio as an interface. I'll skip through some of this. Hybrid models begin to gain traction. Some of this is pretty technical. I want to get to the industry stuff in here. Transformers remain the dominant platform out there versus some of the other technologies. Synthetic data, we continue to hear lots about this, and Nathan's finding it true in his report as well. Model
Hey,
collapse.
Paul,
Yep.
I think I don't want to pass over that too quickly because I still think there's way too much acceptance that transformers are the end game. I
Okay.
don't believe that. They may be, but I don't believe it.
Give us your prediction.
We're less than
Yeah.
2 years into this. So, we've already got two significantly new models, Mamba, which is the SSL model, and Liquid Networks, which is yet another similar to Mamba, but a different model. So we already got 2 different models that show really significant traction now, but they've just been produced. It will take time, and again, at the business level, they have to be more than a little better. They have to be an order of magnitude better to really push out the old models. But some of these look like they well could be.
And Tim, can you share to the non-technical people, lay person in the call, what's revolutionary about a liquid or a?
Well, it's math. It's all math, and the math is done different ways when you turn it into computers. And it turns out that the amount that you have to consider, the simplest way to explain is the amount you have to take into account at each computational cycle is several orders of magnitude smaller. So if you really want to do the original neural networks, you have to take every token of the training data into account for every compute cycle. So with trillions of tokens, that dog don't hunt, as we say in technical terms. And then transformers reduce that by several orders of magnitude because you could do things in parallel, but they still require a lot of input tokens in order to train. And these SSL and liquid models require many less input tokens. So you can train them on much smaller hardwares. So it's way oversimplified, but that's one way to think about it.
And team, keep me honest here as well. For folks in Boston, Liquid AI is a spin out of MIT, is doing a big product launch and company launch this week. My understanding of their innovation is that standard neural networks, they get the formula down or the algorithm down, and that stays constant through all the queries. Whereas liquid,
that is right. That is the other thing about liquid AI as opposed to SSL. So SSL, or Mamba as it's known, is still you train it, then you use it. Liquid trains itself through every run. So basically it's always training. So there is still kind of a training to it, but it's learning as you much more dynamically than the current transformer models, certainly.
Right. Good. So jury's still out. We'll come back and do this a year from now, and Tim will pull up your prediction and see how the things have changed according to Nathan. We'll keep driving for 10 more minutes. I'm going to open mic here. Open model collapse. Web data here. Context proves a critical driver of performance. We've seen that again and again, where more and more problems are being solved by better and longer and more clever prompts or context, things that go in the context or things that go in the box. RAG continues to be a killer app, although lots of different debates on how long-term viable that is at scale. This gets a little more tech. I'm going to shoot through these here. Chinese diffusion models, that's for the image, text to image, and image to text. We've seen a dramatic, obviously, on the video front. AlphaFold, the transformative initiative out of DeepMind, is moving to other biomolecules. And they're getting competitors. So the first fully functioning AlphaFold 3 clone. Tremendous stuff on the biology front for the life sciences. Let me skip through this and jump to the industry part. We've still seen that planning still being a challenge for large language models. I'm going to jump to the industry. I'm going to skip through this stuff. All this is online for free. Ashish, go ahead.
Paul, do you think this report was written before O1 because it's calling planning as a challenge, and then earlier on it had 4.0 comparison but not O1 comparison?
No, I thought they had a whole chart section on O1 in the front here.
Okay.
I think he writes it throughout the year. I think teammates write it throughout the year. Here's an
It
example.
has O1 here, yeah. Okay, interesting. They made that comment about planning.
And that might have been just in general. So let me jump through to the industry section, since we've got a lot of industry focus on this particular call. And we're in slide 71.
Paul, there's a tab, industry, at the top. Can you go there?
No, I'm in presentation mode. Here we go.
Yeah, the tabs don't work for presentation.
So industry, NVIDIA, rocking. We all wish we bought more years ago. And ambitions only grow. We continue to see this. One of the things we talk a lot about in the daily news is that too many people think about NVIDIA as a chip company. They have more software engineers and hardware engineers. They're getting into models, proprietary models, hosting. They're part of a really important verticalization process that's going on, and they are playing hard and fast on many different vectors. And it's not clear that anyone's coming to really challenge them. I know we've seen huge changes. Intel, I think they're rumored to have tens of thousands of layoffs coming up here, may even be purchased. I'll skip over investing. This is interesting. This is the largest clusters of A100s. So Meta has the largest one, then Tesla. And then you can kind of walk down through and see some of the other large ones out there. I guess this would probably be non-government ones. I don't know if government has a larger one or not, but I'd be shocked if they weren't in the top 20 somewhere.
I'm surprised Microsoft's not in here.
And Google.
Yeah.
So
And
good.
Amazon.
Well, you're looking at A100 clusters, remember. So right now, the current hot chip is H100, not A100. So that's 2 generations ago. And both Microsoft and Google make their own chips, and Amazon for that matter. So that's probably going to dilute the numbers a little.
And then, so Tim, to your point, here's H100s that does have some of those larger players on it.
I think there's H200 too.
There is, but the H200s are in pretty limited supply, so they're probably not going to show up very much.
I mean, I think what's interesting about this, John Svioka, I mean, what a play Meta has made in terms of capital, in terms of swinging from being in the doghouse with the Wall Street on metaverse to showing 23% quarterly increase in advertising revenue, to putting tens and tens of billions of dollars down, to sucking up some of the best talent in the world now on the AI front. It's really it's breathtaking.
The empire strikes back.
Well, I think one way to think about it is that synthetic reality created by, generative AI is a step on the way to the metaverse. So, it's just anyway, I think it's a step on the way to what he was going to do anyway.
Right. No, but I mean, but it was, I'm acknowledging the boldness of it.
Yeah.
Did he have to get 350,000 H100s?
Yep.
Compute index, we've seen this go through. Just breathtaking scale on NVIDIA's. Continues to be harder than anyone thinks, which will likely mean harder for competitors to jump in.
Paul, one thing I'll say, in some of our research, I was talking to a company that does a lot of analysis of data centers that are renting out, access to these chips. And the guy threw out a number I don't believe, but I just share it with you as, rumor, that the failure rate on some of these high-end GPUs is as high as 20%, which I can't believe, that's in use. So when running the data center, they're pulling boards, with these things, but it's a high failure rate is what he's claiming.
Yeah, I've not heard. Has anyone else heard that?
Yeah, and also they catch fire.
Yeah.
They catch fire and they fail
Yeah.
20%.
Other than that, they're fantastic. $30,000 a pop. You expect it not to catch on fire? Come on, guys. Yeah, more chips are coming. We've seen a lot of
Sometimes they damage the rack too. So it's a lot of things, operations.
Well, good. Well, lots of things. I think this might be a 200-page report here, but I think where's the revenue? This is an interesting chart on just multiples of revenue on these financing rounds. Is just catastrophic in terms of numbers we've never seen. 20 to 50x was considered large, 24x at OpenAI, and we're seeing huge things on coherent and stability. Here's a one latency. Inference costs coming down. We continue to see this massive drop. John and I and others on our team are walking through a bunch of total cost of ownership models, and it's getting us asked a lot of questions. How many tokens do we actually use ourselves each day, and what will that be like in 3 years? And what's the average employee's token consumption going to be this year versus next year?
What are the numbers for you guys at this point?
On individually?
Yeah, like if you looked at the average token per analyst at GAI.
I think I'm like 30,000 to about 100,000 a day.
Okay.
I'd say minimum. Yeah. Looking at call center operators, we think that those numbers are somewhere between 30 and 100,000 tokens per call center operator minimum. And then if you generate voice with it, it might be 3 or 4 orders of magnitude bigger, 3 or 4 times that, rather 3 or 4 factors above that. And then we think that when you start going into complex wins work, the numbers could be in the hundreds of thousands to millions per day for power users.
But the headline there, Christina, is we're predicting, this is causing us to predict there's just going to be an explosion in token consumption at these companies as they roll out and have more of the early users become more power users, and then all the users starting doing a lot more token intensive activities such as voice and others. Yeah, go ahead, Adam.
Yeah, Paul, you said you're using you estimate 30 to 100,000 tokens a day. What are you basing that on? Like, I don't even know how I would begin to estimate my token count.
Yeah, so right. So I just did for a few days ago. So a few days ago, I went through what I did, and I'd summarize 3 PDFs. I proofread, I had to rewrite 2 blog articles 3 times. And I take each of those use cases and just stick it in Perplexity and say, how many tokens was this? And then I created 2 images. And that particular day, I think it was like 80,000. It wasn't even that much.
Okay, thank
you. Yeah.
Yeah. And then Adam, when we're putting the model together, I'm looking at estimates as when you use RAG, how much does that increase? How many tokens in a conversation? Then when you put it into voice, what's that multiply? Then if you chain of thought reasoning, what does that look like? And so forth. So, if you take each of those factors and roll them through, it gets pretty big, pretty fast.
Are they reporting out the number of tokens by user in an enterprise?
No.
No, I didn't think so.
Not that I've seen. No, we're doing it bottoms up inductively.
It's only, I think, if you're running API calls, like
APIs, correct.
Azure OpenAI, we can definitely count exactly how many tokens we're using.
And by user too, Adam?
Well, we tag them by resource groups in the Azure cloud. So it's not down to the user level, but we can tell specifically what calls are being made to which models and those sorts of things.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Go ahead, Tim. Tim, you're mute.
Trying to get off mute. They changed the interface to Zoom, and with joy on my face. Anyway, so I have a question as much as anything, which is, this reminds me of the early days of data when AT&T and the voice providers were starting to get into data, and it was just a nickel and dime ankle biter affair. And eventually everybody got the idea, well, we'll just charge $60 a month or whatever. And doesn't that have to happen here at some point, because businesses need predictable costs?
Tim, I'll go to Alden here. I mean, that's what we're seeing. All the end users were talking about it, is that customers, that the big companies want that. And it's also really loud thing that came through all the vendor briefings we did, was that all the ones on the enterprise are going towards kind of per seat pricing. That's moving away from variable. Go ahead, Alden. Alden, are you seeing the same thing?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why from day one, we didn't tie ourselves to a token and instead tied ourselves to something people can associate with, which is queries. So even though underlying, we might use 2000 tokens in RAG to answer a query, our customers never understood what a token meant. So it first started as query, and now they are saying like, we don't want to understand what this query thing is. Can you just charge us like $30 a month and let these students or professors use whatever they want? And so it's becoming a usage based, like it's becoming a subscription based
I
type
think
situation.
I think the challenge of that with Alden is that you do have variable cost here, right? I mean, per seat in Salesforce is very different than per seat on OpenAI.
Correct. So you have to somehow have the confidence that it averages out.
Yeah.
And then the other confidence you need to have is that the price of query and tokens is going to zero.
Yeah.
So the hope is that, 1 year from now, we won't even be talking about tokens. We'll just be talking about like, hey, I charge $30 per user.
Yeah. And one thing before we go to Christina, related to that, I know John Spielkla and I, lots of debates on, we're seeing an explosion of usage, but also dropping of that. What are those variables going to be here? And it's not clear to me that it's going to go down with this explosion coming for some companies.
Well, that was what my question was going to be about, Paul. So thank you for addressing it. I mean, it seems to me that part of the problem with adopting is this unknown in the cost as the usage goes up and over time. So you don't want to become dependent on it and then not be able to afford it. When people put the model behind the firewall, what are the costs there as opposed to using a public model?
Yeah, well, depending upon your volume assumptions, they can be significantly less.
Yeah.
But are you still paying per token?
No. Well, it depends. If you're using a downloaded model, you're not.
No, so you're just paying for your own electricity and your own server and your own maintenance and all of that, right?
Correct. Even if you're doing it as a tenant, even if you're buying, yes, whether you're running the servers yourself or just renting as a tenant.
Which is another reason why it would make sense to go behind the firewalls. It's not just to protect your intelligence, and that's a good enough reason by itself, but it also makes your costs predictable.
But the challenge of that we're finding, Christine, is great. So I'm behind the firewall. How many servers am I going to buy? Is it 5x? Is it 5 servers or 50 servers? I think that the variability on that is really wide.
Right, it is, but it is a more predictable and a more controllable cost than just tokens running wild.
Yeah, I mean, it rhymes with the old time sharing stuff when people were running data centers. You buy some and then the time sharing people, a lot of people in time sharing lost a lot of dough because they didn't predict, Alden's sitting there, he has to predict his variable cost, right? And if he's going to sit out there with contracts, then he's essentially writing, naked options, right? In a dynamic market, if you're thinking about it financially. And so if he's right, he's going to make a lot of dough. If he's wrong, he's going to take it on the chin.
Right.
Let's go to Sheesh and Alexander and Tim. Go ahead, Sheesh.
The other aspect is the build versus buy, which is when you take it in-house, now you are responsible for building it and maintaining it. Just imagine running your own Salesforce type system in-house over 20 years.
And keeping up with that talent, Alden.
Exactly.
Find me a good llama engineer that will stay for 2 years and not leave.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Ashish and Alexander.
Yeah, so one of the things we see hear from customers a lot is just ability to estimate usage, right? And especially when we are charging token usage, it is hard for people to just estimate that long term and rationalize budgeting and things like that, right? So there has to be a higher order kind of currency that they can associate, or like messages or queries and things like that that people can abstract to. So token way, there's not enough money to be made there, I feel. Cost per token will keep coming down. And it's just super hard for people to estimate that, especially with multimodal. It becomes nearly impossible.
Great. Go ahead, Alexander, and then Tim. Then we'll finish up.
Yeah, I don't know where it's gonna go with pricing. I think a good article to like read is the subprime of AI. And it kind of talks about all the different things that are happening as far as like token pricing and how specifically OpenAI is getting like a discounted rate right now from Microsoft. And I think a lot of people don't factor that into like the pricing. And there's a reason why they're losing. They're making $5-6 billion, but they're probably losing around $11 billion. So I think it's going to be interesting to see if that could happen, if they can actually get those economics to work, just in general in the AI industry.
Great. Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah, I think it's again sort of a question, which is the TCO thing is very complicated, but it's also complicated because there are non-economic issues like, can I even buy the servers I need, since apparently only the people with the golden keys can get H100s right now. Number two, can I really keep up with Amazon and Google and Microsoft on security and things like that? I mean, they're investing tens of billions of dollars every year in their data centers to do, it just strikes me as there are these second order effects that are very, very hard to deal with if you're going to start to create your own AI data center right now. So I'd be very nervous as a CIO trying to do that right now for these second order problems. And you pointed out the third, which is talent.
Yeah. And Tim, but for the folks that have, I know Morgan Stanley's got 24 of their own data centers now. Do you think that will be declined over the next 10 years?
It's been declining for decades, and I think it's unclear. I mean, again, this stuff, if they don't change the pricing, maybe not, because to your point, businesses want controllable costs. But as Alden said, and I certainly experienced it as a CIO, man, you just do not want to run your own data centers. It is a freaking mess all the time. And if you have any other cost-effective, predictable way of doing it, that's what you're going to do. Now, if it isn't cost-effective or predictable, you will be forced to reckoning, and people will start to create their own data centers. But what will happen, I suspect, is they'll form co-ops, they'll form splinter groups, there'll be, rogue data center vendors who will find ways to make this stuff more attainable to the average customer. I think it's honestly, you should go back and tell your bosses, man, just like AT&T way back when, we actually advised them back in the mid 90s, look, just start offering data for $60 a month. Just subsidize it like crazy right now, because you got to build out the infrastructure. It's going to take forever. But if you get enough of them, you're going to own the world.
It's always easy to spend someone else's money.
They lost, in hindsight, that's what happens. They charged $50 a month, but they lost a lot of ground game in the meantime.
Well, as usual, another fabulous discussion. Thank you, everyone. We will end on time, but see you next week. And thank you, everyone, for all the contributions.